Hi there, hope you're doing well. It's good to be with you this morning. Today is that Sunday between Ascension, which it was particularly marked on Thursday, and Pentecost Sunday, next Sunday. It's a strange sort of Sunday in the middle between two really significant events, which give a lot of depth and meaning to our understanding of and beliefs about and experiences of Jesus. Today we're particularly focusing on those few verses at the end of Matthew 28, verses 16 to 20, which talk about the ascension of Jesus. The 11 disciples go to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had instructed them to go. They see him there. They worship him. And then Matthew says in verse 17 that as they worshipped him, some doubted. And then Jesus says to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." As I was reflecting on this account of the ascension, or really I suppose more precisely the moments before Jesus' ascension, I was particularly struck by something, a little detail in the passage that I don't think I've ever particularly paid attention to before. It's that couple of words at the end of verse 17. Some doubted. Now, when we hear the word doubt, we usually think of, in the terms of our faith, we think of doubt as the sort of questioning that a lot of us experience much of the time. Is Jesus really good? Is God there at all? Questions about our faith. But scholars who examine this text very closely, particularly in the original language, say that the word that Matthew uses here in verse 17 of chapter 28 isn't really about that kind of doubting. The particular words that are used in the Greek text are very specific and refer more to a kind of uncertain hesitancy as opposed to a doubt about faith. You know, the sort of questioning, what do we do now? I'm not sure. What's going to happen next? That kind of thing. So they see Jesus, they worship him, but some are going, what is going on? What do we do now? What's going to happen? It's that sense of not being in control, not being able to say, this is exactly what the future holds. This is what God is going to do. It's that kind of uncertain, hesitant doubting, as opposed to the doubting the tenets and core of our faith. Of course, anxiety, that kind of uncertainty, is a very real experience for many of us. And that goes all the way from the kind of very kind of day-to-day anxieties that we all experience at different times, through to the crises that hit our lives at different points and that we continue to live through in the context of COVID-19 and the ongoing knock-on effects on the economy and so much else. And also through to the kind of more medically defined mental health conditions of anxiety. We all find ourselves in different places on that spectrum at different times. And one of the important things to realize about these moments of hesitancy and anxiety is that the fear that can breed, that these very real experiences of anxiety can breed, very often leads us to try and control things. The anxiety comes to a greater extent from not being able to control things, from realizing that certain things are out with our ability to control, whether it's aspects about the economy or our health or what other people do or whatever it is. And so we can then, as a kind of an instinctive reaction to that anxiety, try to kick back against it by getting control of what we can do. And And a very important part of that will be by not trusting people or not trusting God. So we will keep what we have to ourselves. We will seek to shore up our own position as much as we can. We will not give money away. We will not give our time away. We will not serve others because we've got to look after number one, because all of these other things are out of control. I think you can see that's a very normal and human reaction that we all see in others and we all see in ourselves, if we're honest, at different times. But you see, the thing about anxiety is that anxiety and trust very rarely coexist. And what is needed on the part of you and I, as people who seek to live as Jesus wants us to live, is that repeated, concerted decision to trust God and to hand our anxieties to him. Not to pretend that those anxieties aren't real and to say, it's all right, God's in control. It's not that kind of almost Pollyanna-ish, baptized way of thinking that actually has no connection to the real world. Let's be honest, the most repeated command in the Bible is don't be afraid, don't worry. And God would only repeatedly say that if our fears and our worries weren't real. So let's not pretend that we don't get anxious and we don't get afraid. Yes, we have to confront that and be honest that yes, we all get anxious and we all get fearful at different times, but then consciously seek to do something about it with God. Notice that Jesus' response to this uncertainty, anxiety, fear on behalf of some of these 11 men is to say, I'm in authority here. He doesn't say it's all going to be okay, because, the lives of some of these 11 men at least would end in martyrdom, death, in very painful circumstances. But he says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me, Jesus. So go. Teach people to follow me. Teach people to obey me. And then you'll find I'm with you. Jesus' response to the anxiety and the hesitancy and the fear is to say, I'm with you. Not that it's all going to be easy. Not that the future is going to be suddenly revealed to you and everything will be certain for you. But I'll be with you. Around the time lockdown started, just after last Easter, we had quite a long journey through the story of Abram in our Sunday sermons, and how he responded to that incredible call of God on him to leave behind everything that he and his family knew and go to this foreign land. He didn't even know where it was that God would show him. And we can see, if you remember, from Abram's responses to God and the things he did, that sometimes he trusted God and sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he was obedient to God and sometimes he tried to take matters into his own hands and found himself lying or doing other things that were disobedient to God. In the end, it's Joshua who leads the people into the promised land. And we're still in that kind of space as individual Christians and as a community at St. Peter's and as people who are seeking to live for Jesus in the wider world. We know that as this pandemic continues and as we seek to try and work out how we're going to emerge from this pandemic and what we're going to be on the other side, there's still a lot of uncertainty around. Our personal finances may well be under a lot of stress. I know ours are personally. There's a lot we don't know. Our church finances are under a lot of stress, and we can say more about that in due course, specifically. So there's a lot about the future we can't be certain of. And the temptation for all of us will be, under those circumstances, to try and control everything, to protect, to stay in what we know and have previously experienced to be secure and familiar. But that's not really trusting God, is it? That kind of response to the very normal and real anxieties and fears and hesitancies about what's going on in our world and in our own lives, that kind of protectionism doesn't actually reflect obedience to Jesus, as understandable and human as it is. What actually represents obedience to Jesus is understanding that authority in heaven and on earth has been given to him, and that our duty as his followers, as his disciples, as lifelong learners from him is to go with him, to make disciples, to teach people about living Jesus's way. And as with those 11 men on that hillside in Galilee, Jesus doesn't promise us that everything's going to be easy. He doesn't promise us that everything's going to be secure and comfortable. But he does say, when you go in my name, when you live the sort of life I'm calling you to live, I will be with you. And it will be hard, but I'll be alongside you. I'm not going to call you or invite you into anything that you're going to be alone in, because I'll be with you. So what do we do with this fear and anxiety that can so easily lead us into this scarcity mentality that seeks to protect ourselves and shut ourselves off from risk? Well, the first thing to do, of course, is to notice it and to name it, as we've already alluded to. Not to pretend that everything's okay and easy and straightforward and that God will see us right in that kind of naively optimistic way. No, we say, I'm anxious and I'm scared. And we've got to own that. And one of the ways we can own that is being open about it with each other. I'm scared about our finances personally. I'm scared about the church's finances, or whatever it is that is scaring you. Talk to other people about it. Talk to God about it. And so as you notice it, one of the very simple things you can do is, having noticed it, just as you notice the thought entering your mind, say to yourself, yes, that's real. That anxiety, that fear is real, but I know this to be true about God, and that this will be different for all of you. It will be a little verse that is significant to you. It'll be a thing that God has done for you in the past. It'll be something that you've read this week or heard this week. It is that gradual retraining of our minds, which scientists help us realize now is a very real thing. Our minds can be trained to change, and it takes time. But as we repeatedly reconnect with the truths of who God is in the context of our very real fears and anxieties, we can be part of that reshaping of our minds that teaches us, that shows us that whatever our fears and anxieties, these things are true about God. And at the most fundamental level, that is, he is with us always and we are never alone. Paul alludes to it in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5, where he says, in verse 4, the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive to every thought and make it obedient to Christ. That rewiring, that noticing our fear and anxiety on the one hand, and then saying very quickly on the other hand, that fear and anxiety is real, but this is true about God. That is what Paul is talking about here. The taking captive of our thoughts and make it obedient to Christ. And to do so, we've got to notice the thought in the first place and acknowledge that it's real. In the same way that you've got to notice the symptoms in your body of a medical problem, so you go to the doctor and get the medication and the treatment that you need to deal with it. Notice it and gradually deal with it. And again, it works out in other more practical ways. One of the antidotes to this fear, this scarcity, this protectionism mentality that so easily creeps in when we are hesitant and uncertain, is to consciously seek to do the opposite. So that might be within reason, within bounds of wisdom and what is sensible in terms of what you need for essentials. Maybe to give away money rather than seeking to shore up your financial future at the expense of others who you might be able to help. It might be being quiet and listening to others rather than always seeking to give your opinion and seeking to change things to go the way you want. Just stopping and listening to what others are saying and needing rather than trying to force your own agenda. It's telling God that you want to trust him. I believe, Lord, help my unbelief, as the man said in the gospel when he met Jesus. All those things and many more are simple steps that we will probably need to take so many times repeatedly in a conscious way, day by day, week by week, to rewire our brains and the way we structure our lives and our thoughts so that we gradually learn to respond with trust. I can't pretend that life isn't hard at the moment. It is. Our family are having a tough time. Many of you are having a tough time. Things are hard. And we can't guarantee how things are going to work out. But let's respond to the natural uncertainty and fear of that kind of situation by acknowledging the fear, owning the fear, not trying to pretend it's not there. Reminding ourselves of who God is and what he has done. And start to develop a mentality that doesn't seek to only look after number one, but that seeks to put the needs of others ahead of our own agendas and our own desires and our own needs to fix and control and perfect things. Because as Paul says, the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. They are not the weapons of our own strategies and our own skillfulness and our own perfectionism and our own controlling natures. No, they're none of those, the weapons we fight with. The weapons we fight with have divine power, writes Paul, to demolish strongholds of fear, strongholds of isolationism and protectionism, strongholds of anxiety and hesitancy, and so many more. And as Paul goes on to say, we demolish all those arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive, in a daily repeated way, every thought and make every thought obedient to Christ. Amen.